Hey everyone, Pastor Mark here with Harmony-Toluca Lake and the Harmony Podcast Network. And today, welcome to a short stories episode, part of the Our Story, the podcast. And we are so pleased, I'm pleased to be able to welcome our special guest today, Donna Miller.
Hi.
And Donna is our AV and Contents Director here at Harmony-Toluca Lake. And today we're going to be talking about, creation and how we can be better stewards of creation, but also about veganism.
Veganism. That's why I'm here.
That's the reason why you're here.
I have a vested interest as a vegan for now 6.5 years.
Wow.
It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I think that I love to talk about it, actually, but I don't want to be one of those vegans, one of those pushy vegans or one of those whiny vegans or whatever, which I think, why is that? Who came up with that?
Right.
I feel like people are getting a little...
It's like the activist.
Yeah,
Whoa, save the cows.
They're trying to quash something maybe that they don't want us to be so visible.
Yes, so this conversation started coming about whenever you found out, and we have dived now into the Breathe series, sermon series here at Harmony. And I started off with my very first one at all things breathe. And we talked about Ruha, which is the breath of God. And I tied that into the Genesis story of Adam and Eve, humanity being breathed into life, but then all living things have received Ruha.
Ruha, the breath of God.
Right, the breath of God, spirit. But then if we look past that, so really that's a vegan diet.
In Genesis, it says...
plant-based diet.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but today I wanted to focus on this aspect that if we were created at the very outset to have a plant-based diet, it seems as though that would be something important for us today.
Well, I feel it's important. And we know, by evidence of how many millions of vegans there are in the world, that you don't need animal products to survive or even thrive. And I understand why there is the history of us eating animals, but I don't think that it's necessary today.
Well, it's almost like, where are you going to get your protein? If you don't get your protein from meat, where are you going to get your protein?
Well, all protein, in fact, comes from plants. That's where the animals get it. Right. And so instead of, raising crops and then the animals get the protein from the crops and then we eat the animals, that seems like, why not cut out the middleman and just eat the plants and get the protein directly from that?
Well, I think also corporate America would have a big problem if suddenly we cut out meat, we cut out dairy products.
Oh, yeah.
And we just focused on plants.
Exactly. The Farm Bill and all these subsidies and things, there's a big investment that the agriculture industry has and that the government is also tied into this. And, if you look at the food pyramid that they came up with, it's misleading if you notice things like Got Milk campaign or the notion that we need meat to be healthy.
Well, and the need for milk, a dairy product, which actually is not natural to our bodies, but we'll get into that in just a second. There's this hit series on Netflix that I watched, really good documentary. I was quite mesmerized by it, called You Are What You Eat, and it focused on identical twins and a study in which they had one twin, and I believe it was over an 8-week period, one twin had a healthy omnivore diet, and the other twin had a healthy vegan diet, and it compared how both were affected by those diets. But again, it was healthy, and they even went to the extent of what entails a healthy omnivore diet. The interesting thing was things like cage-free, that you learned within the series. Cage-free doesn't necessarily mean cage-free.
Well, technically, it does mean cage-free, and that's the only thing, right? It doesn't mean that the animals are not suffering and that they're not living a horrible existence until they're slaughtered for their meat.
So we're assuming, oh gosh, they're cage-free, and well, they're all happy.
It paints a
and
picture, of happy chickens or
plenty
happy,
of room for those chickens, and there's
Right.
not an issue at all going on with that.
But that's not true, is it?
Right. And so I found that very interesting within the documentary, although there was something else that really came to light about how the animals that we may eat are treated.
Oh, yeah.
You know, chickens, for an example, that we have become such a chicken breast carnivore in a way of wanting chicken breasts that they have mutated in a way.
Yeah, we've selectively bred chickens at this point to have bigger breast muscles, and that's the part of the chicken that we have decided that we like the best. So we've bred them to have these massive breast muscles, and they can't even support their own weight.
Exactly, which was horrifying to see. And that was just one example, but I was really impressed by this one gentleman who for years had leased his property to raise chickens in a huge barn. And then he realized that they were not being treated ethically, and it was just horrifying to see this. And so he decided to cease operations with this company, and then later said, "How can I make a profit?" And he started raising mushrooms.
Oh, that's great.
Right, and making a good profit by doing this.
Right.
So, all right. So that deals with the documentary, but I want to shift over to you on why. Have you become a vegan as well as, or chose veganism?
You could say choosing, yes.
Or having the epiphany.
I had an epiphany, and
There
yes,
we go.
that's what actually happened. I was enjoying this huge cheeseburger on my birthday about 6.5 years ago, and I, halfway through, just felt so gross. I couldn't finish it. I was just disgusted with myself. And I, looking at it, knowing what it was, looking at this ground up meat, which by the way probably came from like 200 different cows, it was a turning point for me. I couldn't go back. And I was like, I felt terrible. So after a couple of weeks of being vegetarian, my kid, who, by the way, was so good about this whole thing, I said, look, I'm not going to cook meat for you anymore. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to bring it to the house. And they were fine. They're like, oh, you know what? That's fine. I don't have any emotional attachment to meat. So whatever. I was like, okay, great. But this just tells you how my kid is so sensitive and smart. They came to me about a week and a half later and said, you know what, Mom, we should be vegan, not vegetarian. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that. Giving up cheese, and I like cheese a lot. Oh, a cheese pizza. What if I don't have cheese on a pizza, or if I don't have a cheese in a quesadilla? Then what am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? Oh no! And so we watched this documentary together called Earthlings, which is about this animal cruelty and things like that, and is actually footage from inside factory farms, and it's really disturbing. It's very intense, by the way. But go and watch it if you can stomach this, and you may change your mind. Earthlings, and then there's another one also narrated by Joaquin Phoenix called Dominion.
Well, oftentimes we don't want to even think about what's on our plate.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So if you're shown this movie, it's kind of like you can't. The veil has been pulled, and you can't unsee it.
Yes.
So it's really uncomfortable. It's cognitive dissonance. Is it not? Because you don't want to think about the animals dying for your mouth to be pleasured by this food, right? The taste buds get delighted by this meal, and you're like, oh, this is my favorite one. And maybe it's your grandma's recipe, or it's a culturally ingrained food or dish that's been passed down for generations. Why should we give that up? But I think that the animals deserve consideration in the end, and that's why.
Well, also, from a health standpoint, it is healthier for us not to consume red meat.
Totally.
Especially, I have a nutritionist, and she's like, avoid cured meats, avoid processed meats because those are cancer producing.
They are a level 2 carcinogen. If you look on the CDC website, it lists them right there. Salami, bacon, all these things, the sulfites and things, so not just the red meat, which is also bad for you, but the way that they turn it into this product is even worse for you. Almost every reason you can point to for veganism is hard to argue against. And so, a lot of it just has to do with, well, I don't want to give this up. Or we've always done it this way.
Right. We've always done it this way.
We've always done it this way is not a good reason to continue doing something.
Right. So giving us more food for thought, pun intended, we're talking about being good stewards of all creation. So in your opinion, how can we be better stewards, even though we may have an omnivore diet or be vegan? How can we be better stewards of creation?
I think, the everyday person can consider where their food comes from, really think about it, because any meat that you see in your supermarket, 99% of it is going to come from a factory farm. So factory farming, I think, is something that we should look at, and reducing your meat intake even is helpful. Going vegan or reducing or eliminating animal products from your diet is also the biggest way as an individual we can reduce our carbon footprint.
Oh, well, totally. Sorry to interrupt, but I was just thinking about the methane gas that's coming from the fields where the cows are.
Sure.
That it actually is hurting our environment.
Oh, it's terrible for the environment. And also, when you have, like you were mentioning, that chicken coop, that big, huge barn, or other buildings where animals are kept, there's runoff. There's runoff. And as humans, we have the sewage system, and it's treated and all these things. But in the farming setting, that stuff gets sort of like drained into pools that just sort of sit there. And when there's an accident or something happens with the stuff that's in that pool and it gets out, that's what happens when you have, like, say, a lettuce recall, where you're like, oh, the lettuce is bad. Why is the lettuce bad? Because it got contaminated with sewage from animals. And so there's a really triumvirate of reasons why you can consider veganism. And one, obviously, is the health and welfare of the animals. 2 is the health and welfare of the planet. And 3rd is the health and welfare of your own body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
And we love talking about relevant issues and topics such as this one. And look forward to having another conversation with you down the line.
Definitely.
But in the meantime, please, everyone listening, like, share, download, and we enjoy having you part of our listening core for the Our Stories segments, as well as the Our Story, the podcast. And so we look forward to chatting with you again soon, the second Wednesday of the month, as we address another topic. And so in the meantime, enjoy this day, enjoy this week. Peace.